Hey everybody, intro music by Will Alderman. Will was one of our honorable mentions for the contest, so thanks so much, Will. Very, very nice music. And it's a Percussion Podcast. I'm Casey Cangelosi. This is episode 335, and this is one of our roundtable discussions. And I got some really cool hot shots with me. And I think, just to warm up as far as hot shots go, we'll just start by saying hello to the legendary Gordon Stout. Hey, Gordon.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing? How's retirement?
I'm fine. It's really nice to be a part of this and also to see Pius and Jean as well. So thank you.
That's real nice of you to say about Pius. Also, Pius Cheung is here because I didn't want him to feel left out. You know,
After like 20 years, you still haven't learned to say my last name properly.
I didn't even say your last name,
It's Chung. You
Pius
said
Cheung.
Chang.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good enough. And Gene Koshinski's here. Hey, Gene.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And our listeners, I mean, I imagine most of you know all three of these people, and if you don't, you certainly got to check them out, both as performers, but also my favorite thing about them is them as composers. We're all percussionist composers here right now, and I mean, it's almost every day. I think one of you comes up at least one of you in a lesson or something that's happening online or a conversation I'm having with somebody. I mean, you guys are three humongous, important figures in the percussion world right now, especially. So I thought it'd be really cool to get together and have a roundtable, really talk with you guys about some composition topics. And something I bumped into online just the other day really was a fun video I thought called Joke Theft and Cryptomnesia. So I'm going to springboard this conversation by teaching all you listeners a new word. I assume it's new. It was definitely new to me, and I think new to most of these guys too. And cryptomnesia, in short, it's a type of memory bias where you think an idea is yours, but really you've simply forgot something that you heard of or somehow knew of in the past. And this video I saw, where is he? Credit to Will Schroeder, has a YouTube channel. And the video is called Joke Theft and Cryptomnesia. And it's about stand-up comedians and how there's been a lot of drama with joke theft, as in one comedian tells a joke and then 6 years later or 10 years later, another comedian tells like literally verbatim the exact same joke. So he very thoroughly and in great detail shows side-by-side comparison between, I think the first example is a Louis C.K. joke, and then some, I think 6 years later, is a Dane Cook joke that is like almost exactly the same. And they're both in high profile, high traffic, high visible places. Like it's each person's like HBO special. It's something very, very big. And then he shows the exact same comparison. Carlos Mencia repeating the exact same joke, like verbatim, of a much older Bill Cosby stand-up bit. So both offenders, I put offenders in quotation because it's not really clear if this is an offense or not, but both of them claim they did not steal the jokes and that the jokes were original. But when you listen to them side by side, you think, wait, there's no way. And you think how unlikely it is that, say, Carlos Mencia hadn't seen Bill Cosby's stand-up routine. It's like, that would be like me not knowing, I don't know, like something really standard. That would be like me not
Mexican
knowing.
dance.
Exactly. Me not knowing Mexican dances. It's like if I showed up, it's like, hey, Pius, check out my new piece. You'd be like, yeah, no, Casey, that's definitely not your piece. That would be Gordon Stout's Mexican dances. So it just seems really, really implausible. But the idea of this cryptomnesia, it is a real thing, and dates back to like late 1800s. Freud talks about it. Other psychologists talk about it, and people who study behaviors and people who study cognitive biases and memory biases talk about this. And it dates back to instances of like Helen Keller in her writings. Like, she got accused of plagiarizing something, and she says, no, it came from my subconscious. I didn't mean to do that. And there's a lot of examples throughout history where we see this, and it's hot on the internet right now to talk about it with stand-up comedians. And of course, it made me think like, gosh, well, how much of it happens in music? I sure would assume a lot. So anyway, I mean, gosh, open it up to you guys. What did you think of the video? For, I guess just to start with.
I thought it was a fascinating video, and I really I'm glad that you shared it with us, and that it provided a point of departure for this discussion. I think the same thing happens a lot in the field of magic with musicians, and there is trick theft amongst magicians. So maybe not
Yeah.
as much or as common as in music, but very early on, after the Mexican dances were published, within a couple of years, there were a number of pieces that were obviously based on the Mexican dance,
Huh.
the first one, but they weren't that close that there was ever any a problem. But it was like I could go, yeah, that's a reworking of my piece.
What were the things like? What were the commonalities? Was it like ostinato in the left hand, or like jumping octaves like that, or
Ostinato in the left hand with very simple, like roots and fifths and things, and sixths moving up and down in the right hand.
were they percussionists, composers, or were they composers who
Some
did
of
not play
them
percussion?
were, yes. I'm not going to mention specific pieces, and I don't know if I even remember what pieces they were, but it
Hmm.
wouldn't be appropriate to mention names or things anyways. But it was never a problem. I said, yeah, that's obviously based on my piece, but that's something that anybody could come up with.
We always make it a practice here to say names in like the next episode. So I say like, oh, the people Gordon was talking about was this person. So you
I'd
don't
have to
hear
go
it.
back and do some research to help me remember, but
That'd be
it was
cool.
never a big problem. I'll shut
Oh,
up.
no, very cool, very cool. Gene, Pius, what'd you guys think? Any on the just like takeaway?
I mean, initially when I saw it, my initial reaction was like, "Oh crap, did I ever do that?" Because I was like really worried, and I'm not sure. I guess perhaps if it's a real thing, maybe you wouldn't know, and maybe you would be thinking the other person's the offender. Perhaps unless there was some clear documentation. The other thing I thought about is like as it relates to music, like what is actually like intellectual property? Like, as I've had people say, "Hey, well, that's just like my piece. It uses bongos too," and you're like, "Well, what?"
Right.
So like, how far do you have to go before something is an original thought, is quote unquote intellectual property? Like, is it a specific use of pitches or illegal? I don't know what
Mm.
the legal thing is, like using so many pitches in the same sequences. The whole Vanilla Ice situation or whatever.
Right. Well, and there's so many instances of it in pop music. Like it seems like every year you can find the latest or the current, hey, they stole my four chord progression tune. And it seems like the way they often get out of it, the supposed offender is they say like, well, this isn't their song, it's this other song from the 70s. Because like you could probably trace back every one of those songs to something from the 70s or even all the way back to Elvis. It's like that's where the cases always seem to end is with a it's like sure it's plagiarized but not from them, from
Mm-hmm.
something else. But yeah, you're right. Like how many points of similarity do you have to need until we're going to call it plagiarized or not original?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pius, you got to say something.
All right, so with me, I think I've definitely done it. What the crypto what? Crypto amnesia?
Yeah, basically. Yeah,
Yeah,
crypto meaning like you don't it's like hidden and amnesia meaning like
yeah.
you forget.
I'm sure I've definitely done it, and sometimes even on purpose. But like I actually, I think most of you have seen. Can I screen share?
Yeah.
Actually, I listened to the. You disabled screen share?
Oh, just for you. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
mm, okay. Well, I'll look at this ahead of time, and if I approve it, I'll edit it in.
All right, all right. Wait, so, but you've all probably seen like some part of my lecture with this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my five dimensions of music thing, and then I reverse it to teaching people how to start writing, and I just tell them to steal, but not all five things. Like maybe steal one or two from like another composer. For instance, like you can steal the structure from Brahms, start with that. I mean, that's great to start with. Start the structure of Brahms and maybe even a general shape, but then you've come with your own pitches and rhythms and things. Um,
Mm.
but I think once you steal more than like two or three of these things, then it's becoming like too much like the other piece. Or like the orchestration general color of like I don't know, like Daphnis and Chloe or something, but you have completely different pitches. I think that's fine.
Mm. Mm.
That's what I was thinking when I was listening to the YouTube video you were sharing and how it relates to music is in music we can actually like compartmentalize and like maybe learn some stuff and then make some stuff out of our own. I mean, I think you're already talking about how like, you know, from Mozart learned from Haydn, Haydn learned from like Bach, and like Bach learned from, you know, all these people before. So it kind of just goes like that with music, I think. But as long as it's not like more than three categories, is probably fine.
Yeah, Pius. So,
Yeah,
yeah, Mozart and Beethoven. Were those the two you mentioned? Mozart and who else?
I think Haydn.
Haydn.
That's
Mozart and
that.
Haydn. I mean, they both wrote hundreds of pieces in sonata allegro form in the same key. They wrote them in C major, then they wrote them in E major, and there was never any plagiarism or stealing there. And it's just that they were working within an idiom and a vocabulary that everybody in the world was very familiar with at that time. Nowadays, it's those four chords that Casey talked about.
And similarly, like even before that, like isn't like chant is all about borrowed melody, right? So the whole idea of taking someone's melody and then doing your own spin off that. So,
Yeah.
but I guess like how does that relate to current? Like, does that mean it's okay then because Western music is based on that idea of borrowing slash stealing, or do we have a different set of principles now?
There's something more mysterious about how music works because you can see all those similarities, and you could like look at them scientifically and say, see, look, this is the same, that's the same, that's the same, but somehow like we don't mind. Like somehow it comes off as new enough to us somehow. And something they mentioned in the video is that a joke is easy to steal because all you gotta do is repeat it. We can all talk. You just got to like restate what the person said. And of course, it doesn't have the same delivery, it doesn't have the same attitude, but that's easy to do. It's not easy to like steal one of y'all's music because I have to like play it. I have to like, I mean, you could literally rewrite it and just copy it note for note. But few people seem interested in that, in my view. Like very few people seem interested in doing that. They want to be original.
Mhm.
And I also think, like Pius, you mentioned you do it by on purpose sometimes, but of course that would be like you're making a conscious effort to like steal in the way like Stravinsky says, I don't borrow, I steal. And his whole thing is like, well, if you borrow it, it's still theirs, but if you steal it, it's now yours. And like it's now different enough that it is in fact yours now. So I don't know. It's interesting, and it does make me wonder. Like, yeah. So is like anything like truly original, or does everything come from something else?
I will always remember the Santa Fe Festival, and Pius, you played there. It was one of the most amazing concerts I've heard in my life. And at some point, you started asking from the audience, give me a key. Somebody would suggest a key, and then you would say, give me a style, and somebody would suggest a style, and somebody would suggest, give me a mood or something like that. And you said, okay, and then you would just you would compose that piece right then at that moment. That that's what I think. That's really what music is all about, and I was always impressed with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. That's, that makes me blush a little bit. Uh,
C minor, honky tonk. Let's go.
See what
You got a piano?
But
C.
Pius, and the reason I bring it up is I couldn't begin to do that.
Mhm.
What I do is the same thing, only it takes me a month from start to finish, whereas you did it in 6 minutes, right on the spot.
Oh no, it's taking me longer now for some reason as I age.
Well,
But
Gordon did. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, I actually lost my thought. Go ahead, Casey.
Well, I was going to say, Gordon, like Pius and I have talked about that before. Like writing is taking both of us longer now, and I was just going to ask, did you find that ever happened to you? Like, did pieces take longer? Did it get the opposite, or what?
Well, lately they've taken a lot longer for me because I take these pieces that were in their initial formats, maybe 4 minutes long or maybe 7 minutes long, and then I keep going back to them and experimenting with them, improvising on them, and come out to find that I've got a 15-minute piece.
Hmm.
So yeah, that takes a lot longer. Part of that is I can't, that I can't learn pieces to play as quickly as I used to. It takes me longer just to learn my own music, but it also takes longer from the point of view that it's a longer composition. My technique and my chops at composing is if anything, faster than it used to be.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I feel like I'm better at doing the things. I'm better at predicting what's gonna happen. I can write these like playback pieces quicker, but yet I feel like the pieces have to be better. It's like, well, more people are paying attention now, and like before it was real easy. Like, oh, I'm gonna write this. Nobody's gonna hear it anyway. It's fine. And now you feel like there's more eyes on you. It's gotta be special, you know?
I don't know how you feel about that, Gene.
I feel like personally, there's a lot of noise in my life, and it's hard to really focus and be creative. And if I say, okay, well, we have 30 minutes to sit down and be creative, I feel like so under the gun and at pressure to do that. When I was younger, and in my 20s, and I wasn't married, and this and that, and I can spend like 8 hours like going down the rabbit hole for something. I feel like just me personally, my creative process, I could just marinate in it a lot more. And I feel like now there's so much stuff going on, and things are too busy to allow that process, I think, to be as organic as I'd like. And in terms of the whole inspiration discussion too, it's sort of similar. It's hard to be inspired when things are so busy for me, and it's not even good busy. It's just a lot of mundane things too. It kind of gets in the way of just trying to be creative. I mean, that's my personal feel right now.
It seems like you're producing a ton right now. Like I feel like you and Tim just like crank things out really faster than I've ever seen.
Oh, really? I don't know. I mean, maybe it seems that way, but also on the other hand, I feel like we've been playing some pieces for like forever, and just the monotony of that is also kind of,
Uh-huh.
I don't know, maybe like behind what goes out on YouTube or whatever, there's something else happening. I'm not sure, but
It
yeah.
just seems like the intervals in the at least in the video releases are like really short. It's cool.
Well, the past couple things we haven't been doing it ourselves, so we can get them out faster. Maybe it's just like a
Look at that.
logistical thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, I guess this kind of leads to a question that I'm sure we all get from students a lot, and that is, what is influence for you in music? And it's probably a question you've all answered 100 times, but I don't know, maybe has your answer changed over the years? What is influence to you? How about Pius?
Maybe I just share what I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
Like I'm working on actually a marimba concerto right now, but I'm starting with like maybe hold on. It's hard for me to share. But I can't hear you.
Oh, there's a weird website in your screen share. What was that?
I don't know. I have a whole bunch of stuff. It's probably the Percussive Art Society article on the Hall of Fame.
I'm sure it was. Yeah, yeah.
But there's right now I'm working on this marimba concerto. I'm starting with the solo marimba version first, but then the technique I'm using for finding those pitches is something I learned from analyzing a Boulez cello concerto. And I'm just using the same technique, of course, completely different pitches and everything, but I'm using his method of picking pitches, which I think he learned from Stravinsky. I'm not 100% sure. So I don't think that's stealing, but that's definitely like influenced by the method and a general idea of using how to pick pitches and a general use of color maybe.
Well, and the fact that you will openly say this is a system Boulez devised, which probably derived from Stravinsky's system, like something they didn't address in the joke theft videos. Like, well, what if the comedian who's stealing just said, "So I heard this funny joke by Louis C.K. once," and then they just repeated it. Like, would it be okay? Like, would people still laugh? They certainly couldn't accuse him of stealing.
Well,
I
that
feel like
becomes us playing someone else's pieces. It's
Right,
I'll
like
still listen.
I feel like we do it all the time. I mean, I talked about Nancy Zeltzman. You know, something my teacher used to say, Nancy Zeltzman, was this. Like I say that in lessons, like all the time. You know, we just put the credit where it's due.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a ton of those pieces that are like an homage to somebody or something, and or it's in the style of, and I think there's definitely validity there as long as it's certainly upfront, like this is the guise in which it was written, and not trying to pass it off as one's own thing. I mean,
Mhm.
certainly throughout history, think of all the symphonic literature that was written, borrowing this theme or theme and variations on this and that and whatnot. So I think that's a different thing than this cryptomnesia thing. That in
Mhm.
terms of my thought on it.
Well, I think so too, because it's on purpose and it's intentional. You know, you're not doing it by accident. You know, crypto amnesia just happens without your knowledge. You
I
know.
I don't know if you guys ever done that, but when I was taking like composition lessons, it may be also like a Philly thing, but a good exercise would be just to practice writing in the style of another composer, just as exercise, just homework practice. And we did that. And then
Well, that
eventually you come up with your own thing, kind of.
well, that's what I think. What I always tell students is the missing idea. Like I think you think of composition as like this really mysterious, bizarre thing, but really it should feel a lot like just practice. You
Mhm.
know, like, okay, you don't know what to write. Well, too bad you're gonna write something. You know, it's like, oh, I'm not inspired to do my scales for practicing. Like, well, too bad you do your scales anyway. I mean, there's no question. It's like we don't care if you feel good about practice. You got to practice. You know, I mean, ideally you feel good about practice, but when you don't, what do? You just do it anyway. Sorry. I mean, it's like composition should sort of be. I feel treated the same way. You know, it's like the fuzzy feelings, at least for me, they're very short lived. They don't last very long. The rest is getting notes on the page and like really struggling to flesh out the ideas. And it can be, yeah, pretty tedious. You know, it feels like practice.
I, Casey. Uh, when I was at Eastman, there was a room with a piano in it in the practice room annex that I really liked on the fourth floor. And there was never anybody in that part of the building early in the morning. So I always snagged that piano and did my composing there every single morning.
So yeah, exactly. And then now, what did you do when? I mean, what were you doing when ideas weren't coming, or you're not inspired? What would you do?
Well, there was a curriculum set up that was most noticeable to me as a student when I studied with Sam Adler, because he made us compose 12-tone music. So he made us come up with matrices and things like that. And I always remember getting in trouble because, what a matrix looks for, like, obviously. But I would start in the middle and work my way around in a spiral to the outside and then work my way back to the middle. And that was when the piece ended. And Sam never liked that, but I thought it was really a wonderful way because I didn't have to worry about where the pitches were coming from. They were determined in advance by the spiral use of the matrix, but so that I could concentrate on other things like rhythm, harmony, and form.
Well,
Excuse me.
Gene, where do you, well, what two questions, like, where do you think inspiration comes from for you? And what do you do when, yeah, you do find the time, you're staring at the page and it's blank and you're hoping something appears for you?
I mean, for me, the most creative, inspirational ideas usually just come, when you're not sitting there staring at a page. I think that's the important part. For me, I always try to document as much as possible. Like when I get something and I don't have time to experiment or evaluate it, documenting it on, a voice memo on my phone or typing in or keeping in journal or something like that. Because then when you're staring at a blank screen, you could then have this Rolodex of ideas that you can page through and see if something fits, what you're trying to do in the moment. At least that's a good process for me because if I'm just staring at a blank screen, like I'm in trouble because I'm not the kind of person that's just going to start creating something. I feel like a lot of my process, I guess you could say, is through improvising and experimenting. So I might have, if I'm writing a multiple percussion solo or something, I might get out tons of stuff and make a huge pile of things and sort of improvise and experiment a little bit rather than stare at finale and be like, okay, well, it'd be cool if there was eighth notes on snare drum right now, and then try to build out that way. I've tried that and composing away from instruments, but I feel like it always becomes disconnected and sort of inorganic or not idiomatic or whatever it might be. In the same way, just playing on marimba, improvising something, and I might come up with, hey, I really like that idea. Let me write it down for later, or let me use it right now. And that's sort of kind of the way that I approached it.
I'd like to respond to that, Gene, but maybe first, Casey, could you tell us where you get your inspiration and ideas from?
Well, I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. I can only assume it comes from all our experiences in life, and it's strange. They just appear. It's like, well, why did that come to me? Why did that come to Gene? And I can tell you, I enjoyed Better Call Saul. We watched that. We watched the U.S. Open the last couple nights. It's like, I can tell you what I've absorbed, but I mean, I don't know. You see someone who absorbs just as much and has been through the same kind of influences. I know I had a big argument in a studio class with my students once. We were talking about grades and testing, and just a couple of the students were like, "Oh yeah, like public school is terrible. It just totally squashes creativity. The way the system is, the way tests are, it forces you just to play the test and not think creatively." And I thought, like, well, wait a minute, why I went through regular public school? How come I turned out, supposedly creative in quotations, and my friend sitting next to me didn't? We went through all the same stuff. So it's really, I think, mysterious where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Like, and I wonder if part of it, and something this video kind of made me think of, is like, if people aren't inspired, does that mean they aren't influenced? Like, was Pius right when he said, you should learn to compose by studying other composers and like actually repeating what they did, even if it's not a piece you're going to keep, like an exercise, like a practice exercise. And so maybe that means, like, okay, you need to be influenced before you're even able to be inspired. So
Yeah.
yeah, write your own piece that's similar to the you pick something that's similar to the first 8 bars of Beethoven 5.
Yeah, my story about the Matrix when I was studying with Sam Adler was at a point when I was young enough, like my second year of ever taking composition lessons, that I didn't always know what to do. I didn't always have ideas that came easily to me. But I was influenced by hearing a huge amount of music, and I actually started listening seriously to it during those same years. But there was a lot of stuff had to be based on classical. That was my background. That's what I grew up with, was classical music. But at Eastman, there was a ton of other stuff as well. It was mostly classical, but I learned about jazz and et cetera, et cetera. The music that I heard in concerts, from Messiaen to Schwantner to Arthur Rubinstein playing Chopin to Leontine Price singing with an orchestra. I mean, those were all things that would go into my ears. And the more I learned to listen carefully and seriously, the more they were able to stay in my mind and not come in one ear and leave the other. And then I was fortunate to be able to travel around the country and around the world, and that helped me to further listen to different musics and different cultures. And I've never been afraid to just walk up to the instrument and start playing with the idea of composing right then. This is why I brought up that concert that you did, Pius, because I love to do that myself. Just walk up to the instrument, not say, I'm going to improvise, just start playing and improvise and compose a piece right on the spot. And what that does is it gives me plenty of ideas and plenty of inspiration, and then I can take it the rest of the way through my compositional background, my chops.
You mentioned like the things coming in and sticking, and a thought I had with the Cryptomnesia video was, I don't know if jokes stick the way music sticks. Like it would be, I mean, I think it would be really bizarre if I accidentally, rewrote Mexican dances. It's like I'll never forget it. I learned to play it, and there's so much effort and dedication and commitment it takes to learning that you're not going to just kind of accidentally forget it. I mean, even when we listen, like when you really learn a piece and you listen to it enough, even if you study it a little bit, you're probably not going to forget that it's not yours. Whereas a joke, yeah, sure, like
Yeah.
jokes come and go every day.
Just to go back really quick on what Gordon said, I would like to like maybe put a footnote on that because it's so amazing, such amazing information about listening and how that inspires influence. And I feel like I'm sure you all agree when you hear a student composer, you'll kind of know exactly what their experiences have been or what they are listening to.
Mhm.
And for those that are new at composing, I always try to say, almost like listen to everything but percussion music. Like try, have you heard like Chopin? Have you listened to the orchestral canon? Like what do you listen to? Do you listen to pop music? Do you listen to Miles Davis and Coltrane? Like, because I feel like a lot of students that want this burst of creativity are also, academically like really pigeonholed with like what they're doing like in the moment, and they haven't really experienced a breadth of listening. And just how you would teach jazz or learn jazz, a lot of it comes from listening and imitation first, and then building your own voice after you have learned the vocabulary.
Do you guys all have some kind of favorite go-tos to inspire students? And like, Pius, you mentioned they should try to compose in someone else's style or follow their exact method. Like, do you have a favorite, like, for a young person to follow?
Say what?
Oh, you zoned out? You all right?
No, no, no. So do I have a favorite method or a favorite?
No, like a favorite piece to assign. Like when I want to show a student how stuff they write can
Hmm.
represent something rather than just make a
All right.
sound, I'll show them Charles Ives' unanswered question because it's super easy to see how
Right.
it works. And they've probably never heard anything quite like that, and it's pretty dang cool. So like young kids are like, whoa, that was like really far out. And you can see this voice represents that, that one represents that, and it's like very obviously clearly delineated like what the metaphor happening there is. So that's probably my first go-to favorite, and I guess I'm wondering if everyone else has a go-to.
I don't have a go-to favorite piece to like, kind of like blow the students' minds or anything, but that circling back, that exercise I was talking about really is just an exercise. Like I don't mean like to write your entire life. It's like it's just like I'm gonna write in the sound of Mozart for like 5 years or something. No, do it for like one piece or something, and then just practice. And then there's another exercise that another more or less composition teacher of mine, Bright Shang, gave me. It was super cool. Like write like I forgot 20 or 30 chords, just whole notes, and have them be in like a from tension to release from one another, just each chord increasing in tension. But it's not actual music. It's like he was just like, yeah, it's just same as you practicing your 16th notes or whatever. That's just practice. So, and then a lot of times with my students, I just show them whatever I'm studying. Sometimes it's Boulez, sometimes it's David Lang or something, and then I'll just analyze it with them. Being, of course, we're percussion professors after all, so I don't actually have time to spend like an hour a week with them talking about how to write music. Like if they're
Mm.
interested, sure, I'll help them. So mostly it's analyzing music, and then I might give them some ideas. You could try that, and then here's some exercise. If you want to do it. But next week still bring back your stick control or something. It's probably not stick control, but
Right. It's fun to see. I want to hear Gordon and Jean's
Yeah.
favorites if they have any, but I was going to say quick, like Pius, it's fun to see your like what you're interested in like over the years. And like I'm curious, like why is it Boulez this time? And maybe it's always been Boulez, but now Boulez is coming to the surface and I know that it's Boulez, you know?
yeah, because I never liked it before. I
Mhm.
quite often I'll just find a type of music that I never understood, but everyone seems to dig it, and I'm like, all right, let's see what this is about, and then I'll usually learn something. Uh, and it's just a lot of analyzing. I remember trying to analyze a sedimental structure, and then I found some like dissertation of someone using set theory. I'm like, oh, this is so cool! Oh my God, Gordon must have been like doing all this math, and then I remember messaging Gordon, like, That was cool, yeah. No, I just really just wrote. I'm like, what? How do I train that to be my instincts? I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, well, that piece was composed by ear. So I just came up with the first bar, which is 4 beats of 16th notes, and the third and fourth beat relate to the first and second beat. So I just came up with that by improvising, and then I just took it from there. Started improvising some more, came up with some different ideas, but I was not thinking about set theory or any kind of structure or anything like that. I was just improvising and letting my ears go where they would go. Yeah, and yes, a couple of years later, I found out that it was all based on 013, I think it was. And I said,
Hmm.
I don't know that. And the guy also said, you don't use C natural anywhere in the piece. So I had to go back and say, what do you mean I didn't use C natural? Well, I found 2 bars where I used C natural 4 times, and I had to write the guy back and suggest that he update his article. But I had
Wow.
no idea any of that happened. It was just something I did by ear.
I had to teach that to our student, Will Alderman, and it was a blast. I mean, it was great, but it was hard for me. It's like, okay, yeah, it feels like there is some, yeah, like great plan that someone would write a dissertation about, but it's like, well, knowing Gordon, I bet he just did it by ear.
But can we credit who? I forgot who wrote the dissertation because it was really good. Can we credit who that is?
Um, the
Mm.
one, I don't know about the dissertation, but Lee Stevens sent me an article that one of his students in London wrote, but it was more like in a Schenkerian analysis kind of structure with snippets of music here and arrows there and bar numbers. It was that kind of more like a technical drawing of the piece. And I don't remember the guy who wrote that. I could find out.
It's kind of a it's kind of a problem with analysis. Like if you're just going to pick something to analyze and you're not sure if it's written in that specific way, I mean, you're gonna find all these relationships. You're gonna find with any enough information of anything, you're gonna find all these seeming correlations, but it doesn't mean they're meaningful or that the composer had them or anything. I mean, it's like how conspiracy theories work, right? It's like, well, with enough information, you start to like, you can easily claim there's connections, but that doesn't mean they're there.
Now, to get back to what Gene said and what your idea, Casey, about what go-to thing do I do? Well, first of all, I rarely taught serious composition lessons. I think more like Pius, it was just my percussion students would say, come into their lesson, and they wouldn't have shit to do because they didn't practice, and their girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. And, but you said, but I wrote
Blah,
this
blah.
little thing. Would you look at this little thing that I wrote? And
Yeah.
that's what it turned out to be. But more with the novice composition students, and I don't know who I learned this for, but if you come up with four pitches, like bass, tenor, alto, soprano, play them as a chord that you like the sound of. Then if you can come up with a chord that you like the sound of that follows that chord and you like the relationship chord chord. You see that, is that something that I like? What's the interval between the bass voice of the first 2 chords, and then you transpose that interval to another pitch level, then you have 4 chords, right? And then you can do that 2 more times and you have 8 chords. Now, then if you take the soprano voice, you have an 8-note melody. And if you take the alto voice, you have an 8-note melody. And there's plenty of things for a young novice composer to use those very basic things to develop ideas and inspiration. And I thought that worked pretty well over the years.
And you can see how they would build on it too. Like,
Right,
you ended it there, but geez, I mean, you could just keep unfolding that and unraveling it
right.
till you're
And
done.
then I would say, if you're stuck, here's what you do. You have to make a decision. Do I want to do the same thing again? Do I want to do the same thing differently, or do I want to do something completely different? Right?
Hmm.
So if you do the same thing, there has to be a reason for wanting to hear that music twice.
Hmm.
Well, a really simple example on the Mexican dance, it's loud the first time, soft the second time. Well, that's pretty simple, but it worked, right? Do you want to do something different? Well, the second section was something completely different. And the last section was the same thing as the beginning, but changed in a variation. So with those simple tools of answering those three questions, it gives you an entry point to the area of formal development in your composition.
It seems like it's hard for a lot of young students to accept that any one moment wouldn't sound good. You know, that any passing one of those passing chords wouldn't be like their favorite. It's like, well, music doesn't work like that. Like, I mean, you need to have the things in between. Like, yeah, of course they need to, they just pass by, they go by so quickly. I mean, of course you can't be loving every single microsecond of everything you hear.
Right. And when I was studying with Sam, and I would get to one of those points that I didn't like the way a chord sound because of the row, I would just change the pitch. And Sam, I'd come into my lessons and he'd sit at the piano and he'd be totally silent. He'd read through the piece, and then after about 5 minutes, he'd stop and say, "Gordon, you changed this note. That's wrong."
Wow.
That was the way Sam Adler was. Oh, he was a great mind. You couldn't pull anything over on Sam. So,
Where you change this?
Gene, you haven't mentioned anything in a while. With your percussion duos that are so creative with instruments that you make up, like the little spring sound.
The IP boinger.
Yes. I mean,
We got a few boingers around here.
I
Where
think
do
the
you
word you're
get
looking
the-
for is gimmick.
so where do you get the ideas for these gimmicks? They're absolutely wonderful, and people love them.
Yeah, I think I have probably 10 times as many gimmicks as I try to put in a piece, just because I've always had sort of that I like woodworking and fixing things and kind of tinkering around with stuff. So there was a bunch of times, especially in summers when I have extra time, just making weird implements and just experimenting and trying things. And then if I again like that spring thing was for like an improv thing I was doing with a movie just for fun. It was really incidental. But then I just always remembered that and had that in my mind. Like, that would be really cool someday to like write a piece using that. And it was sort of also serendipitous. Like, I just liked the spring part. And then when I found that you can do the friction roll with the other side, I was like, wow, this really unlocks so much. So again, it wasn't like staring at the blank screen. It was like just hands-on, what can I do with this? And even since writing the piece and putting it sort of in a set thing, I explored even more sounds that I can get. So it would be great to use that in some other context now that I've found even more stuff to do. But I think as it relates to the conversation a little bit about being creative and composing, I always think about it in two different categories. Like, it's one to have an idea and get these ideas, but I think actually crafting something and showing and like practicing your compositional skill, like Pius is talking about, I think that's a separate conversation. And I think students get lost in that, thinking that it's the same thing. I'm going to be creative and then the piece will exist. I feel like there's two sides to that coin, because I always say, like, a lot of people can get an idea. Like, I have a cool lick on marimba, but I can't write a 10-minute piece based on that. So trying to get over that hump. And I feel like the other thing I wanted to mention is that there's a lot of, me included, like, I don't feel like a composer, never have, and I never, like, I feel like compared to all the stuff that I hear, like my stuff sucks. Like, I'm not interested in it all in it. And I have this great imposter syndrome. Like, every time someone says, oh, this composer wrote this piece with the spring stick, I'm like, man, that's some schlock, like, it's silly. But
Gene, I need to interrupt you.
Okay.
Because I disagree with you. I mean, the compositions that are in your two mallet method are absolutely wonderful compositions. There's no bullshitting in that book. Those are great pieces.
I appreciate it, but I feel like I guess those two mallet pieces I probably put the most time and effort into. I think, and I'm not relying on the gimmick of the spring or this or that to kind of draw attention. But even in that, I tried my hardest to have some sort of compositional skill, but I feel like it's something you really have to work at. But what I was trying to say in that sort of imposter syndrome thing is that I always thought, like, okay, I don't have the credentials to be a composer. I didn't study it in school. I didn't get like a certificate and go through this or that. But I don't think you have to, right? You just have to like be creative and exercise that side of your mind. And that's something that personally I'm trying to get over, to consider myself a little bit more like, yeah, I'm actually trying to do this thing. And something that I'd like to, like when students come and say, well, I only have this, is this the right answer? Like, well, there's no right answer, you know. It's just
Well,
tapping into creativity.
perhaps you put it all together from the music of yours that I know in the piece with women's chorale and three percussionists where they play the marimba solo. What's the name
Yeah.
of that? I'm sorry.
Concerto from Marimba and Choir. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible composition.
No, I appreciate that very much.
Gene, I gotta disagree with you too. You called it schlock, but I think it's pronounced schlack.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Can you edit it out?
hey, is your is your IP Boinger piece, is that your most played solo, do you think?
Um,
Is
Oh, it's the bassoon piece.
yeah, probably the bassoon thing, which is started from such a silliest place, but yeah, it turns out bassoonists don't have like a lot of cool reps, so it's a
Yeah.
real easy sell.
So like as far as duos, bassoon and cajon hi-hat piece is like
Yeah,
not grab it, that's a Jacob ter Veldhuis. Sorry, what's it
yeah,
called?
there's no F word in this one. Get it.
Get it, that's right. Yeah. Oh man, grab it is so yeah, I love
Grab it is
that.
such a cool piece.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. We had Get It here a few years ago.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean the snare drum piece, I think it's mostly because a lot of people just, are looking for a snare drum piece and it's easy. I think the other issue with some of the, you know, gimmicky instruments or stuff like that is a lot of people don't play it because they don't want to hassle with trying to find the stuff and
Mhm.
get the things, So
Yeah, of
even
course.
as simple as like putting the kalimba on the snares, I'm like, I don't want to deal with finding a kalimba that'll work, and um,
Do you think we like because we all think those pieces are awesome, and I love the one with the kalimba on the marble in the on the jar and the glass, excuse me. Like I mean, I think we all think they're really great, and I wonder like, do you think like you kind of imposter syndrome about it, which is a healthy thing. Like imposter syndrome is like they say that's like an engine that keeps you like doing better, and you're not really pleased with everything you're doing, and that's the engine, the momentum that makes you do better next time and even just like keep going, etc. So like it's not a bad thing, but I just wonder like, do you think you're you don't think of it as good art as I do because you had to like live with it for so much longer and you had to compose it, and I know I felt that way about my own pieces, but I
yeah,
think
I
if
definitely feel that way. Like, like, okay, I was in my basement with a bag of Cheetos, like just staring at this glass for 2 hours. Like it's a different thing than like buying the score from Steve Weiss and like, I'm going to play this, like how you imagine like Bernstein sitting at the piano, like, and like having some sort of really artistic thing going on. But the other thing, like, it's just, I mean, we all probably agree, like writing music is hard work. It takes a lot of time and a lot of, I mean, I don't think like I don't, I mean, maybe I just speaking for myself, I don't sit down and just like pump out like 5 minutes of music and then like go have dinner. Like for me, it's like takes a long time to unpack and a lot of stuff in the trash can.
Mhm.
Hey, Gene, uh, in my last 3 or 4 or 5 years of teaching, I found that I had little time for composing. You know how the university, you all know how the university things go, search committees this, curriculum committees this, crap, all that stuff. And now I lost my train of thought, but,
Just keep going
oh,
on that. That's fine. We can
no,
talk
I
about
know. No, I don't want to get on a rant on higher education. I can do that in a bit. But it was difficult because I had an half hour free here. And then the next day I had an hour free, but it was a different part of the day, et cetera, et cetera. But gradually I trained myself over 2 or 3 years to be able to use those little teeny moments to continue work. Even if, say, it was a piece that I hadn't gotten back to for a week. I still found that hour free during the day when I could get something done in that piece. And that was really helpful to me. Now, it's not easy, but I trained myself to do that when I was teaching. Now, it's like okay, do I get up at 7? Do I start working at 8? Or do I start working at 9? Or do I just watch television and start working at 1?
Hmm,
See, I can make those kind of choices now.
nice. How about you all? Do you feel like if you have like a summer or a deep dive period of time, are you more creative than if you have, under the gun for a timeline or a due date or something like that?
I think a due date helps me.
Really?
I'm
Okay.
reading child psychology books now.
Are you?
Yeah, there's a
How you
lot of
how
stuff.
you sleeping, buddy?
I'm sleeping okay. She slept 13 hours yesterday. We're talking about my baby
Yeah.
in Erica, so but right now it's all a lot of late night working. That's when I text you guys and I'm like, oh, and I was working on a snare drum piece which totally sucked after like a month of staring at it. So it's like on the back burner right now.
Mm.
But I have two things. One is I forgot to say another favorite composition exercise I like to tell my students is like compose but with limited parameters, like use only 2 pitches or something or 3 pitches. But everybody does that. And then I also Gene, I've always thought your music, like the development, the technique you were talking about was interesting, but I've always thought your music, your raw materials are usually so good. Like somehow it's so attractive. Like the way you pick your pitches or your grooves or something. I don't know if you can teach that or not. That's just how do you come up with those? Like sometimes you're like, oh, that's somehow that pitch set is just like, ooh, that's cool.
Man, I don't know. It's just like Casey said, I have no idea. I mean, kind of like what Gordon talked about a little bit before. Like, I feel like a lot of it for me is done by ear and less like theory and thinking about things. And I had a colleague when I was living in Minnesota. I'll never forget. It stuck with me. He said, music goes in here, not in here. And that always kind of stuck with me, that it's like really a sonic art. And if it doesn't, at least to me, if it doesn't sound good, certainly there are reasons why it should exist and should study it and analyze it. But for me, like the how it sounds is always the most important part, and the way that I just screw around and improvise and experiment, and when something comes in here that I like, I kind of remember it. But what generates that, I have no idea. Yeah.
So what you're just saying, you're just born cool.
No. No, not at all. I mean, like, think about like great jazz improvisers. Like, to me, that's like crazy. Like, I wrote a piece based on like the Keith Jarrett Kernel album. Like, it's that
Sure.
to me is absolutely insane how something like that exists. I mean, it's just mind bending. But they're creating magical moments in real time, and I'm struggling for months to, it's nice that it turns out well, but it's still like a small fraction, I think, of the time that it takes to get there.
And I think, Pius, you've talked about listening to people, listening to other music as a way to help gain your inspiration. And I believe in the 3 Bs. For me, those 3 Bs are Bach, Beethoven, and Bartok.
And beer.
I can go to listen to any music by any of those guys and get plenty of inspiration. Plenty. And so that's one of the reasons, here's my rant, that I really felt I had to leave academia, because I would talk to the students and I would say, when I was your age, I knew all the Beethoven symphonies by ear. I didn't know who Beethoven was, but I could sing you all the themes. Have you ever listened to the Beethoven symphonies? And they look at me like, what the hell is your problem? No. and invariably what they would say, bottom line is, I haven't had time to do that. And I got tired and sick and tired of students not having time to learn music properly and learn it well. So I got out of academia.
I ran into a term that I think explains some of that a little bit. Just
Yeah.
researching some of these cognitive and memory biases, and a cognitive bias out there is called the Google effect. And the bias is that we forget stuff that we know we have easy access to. So for instance, it's never been easier to pull up the Beethoven symphonies. So if like your teacher asks you to take a listen and you can find it so easy and it's so easy to get there and you can always get back to it and you can just resume where you last were, and like it's easier to forget stuff according to this Google cognitive bias.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but I've experienced that too. I mean, every time I share a piece in studio class, I really make an effort to have everyone with a paper score in their hand, and that's not because it's paper. It's just that it's close, and they can see the details. They don't have to share. They don't have to hope they can see what's on the screen. They have a score in their hand, and then 100% of the time I've ever done it, when we play something start to finish, they all love it afterwards and they're inspired. And it's something that tells me is like, yeah, I don't think people listen start to finish nearly as much as they used to.
Yeah. They say they don't have time.
Yeah.
You know, last year, not even like 10 months ago, about when my students came to me, like, I don't have time to do whatever or whatever. So as a challenge to kind of to myself and to them, like after Emma was born, I learned all the lute suites and then I played it for them. I'm like, there, I think you have more time than me, and I still did that. So you go practice. That was not probably the smartest thing to do, but yeah.
Well, seems like they're getting a lot of attention at least. I'm kind of curious about Gene's like deadline question. I feel like there's a lot more there. I feel like I just had a very good personal success writing a piece. It was under a deadline, and like I never thought I could have a timpani and tape piece that I would be happy with that I wrote, but I feel like I'm really happy with this. And it was, I think, big thanks to the deadline, like having a deadline behind it. And I don't know, what do you guys think? Like if you're allowed to just freely stew and there's nothing coming up or no timeline set for it, how do you do, Gordon?
Well, first of all, I don't get commissions, so I don't have deadlines. Simple.
Well, do you have any kind of deadline?
Trying to finish what I am working on before I die. No, I don't
The
really.
ultimate deadline.
No, yeah, the ultimate. No, I just keep every day I get up and I say, I want to practice and I want to compose more today. And that's what I do every day with whatever time I has. It could be an hour, it could be 5 hours. So I just take it for what it is. But no, I've had a few deadlines over the years, like when I wrote Desperate Attitudes for Mike Burrett at Northwestern, which was to commemorate the death of Princess Diana. And yeah, he called me up and said, it's like a month and a half. I need those parts. And I did a lot of late nights and I finished it and had it to him less than a week later. So that helped me to really get that project finished.
Yeah.
So I remember that instance.
To me, Gene, it's the old saying like good is better than let's see, finished is better than perfect. And another way of saying it is perfection is the enemy of good. I think I like that one better because like if I'm left to like when I'm writing playback pieces, like your synthesizer, I mean there's just a bottomless selection of sounds you can create and come up with and toy with. So I just give myself a limit. If you don't have a limit, you'll keep searching and searching and searching and like you're aiming for perfection, of course, but it's like you'll never get it done if like all you're accepting is perfect.
Yeah, for me, deadlines are kind of a nightmare, just because I feel so strapped. And I also feel, okay, I can throw something together, but I'm not going to be happy with it. And ultimately, I prefer just to have like not an open amount of time. Like I'll spend 10 years writing a piece, but if I just feel like, I can do it. I just don't prefer to work like that just because I just feel like stress all the time, or stressed about getting, a certain amount done every day or every week. And I remember talking to, you all know Dan Levitan, right? Wrote a bunch of percussion pieces, and I asked him about a commission one time, and he's like, "Oh, I don't take commissions. It just takes way too long to write music. It's not worth it." And I always thought that was sort of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Pius
right
says
now I'm at
something.
the point. Oh, go ahead, Casey.
I was going to ask you. Yeah. Tell us what you think.
Oh, deadlines is right now. It's weird because I used to write really quickly. So, and then I started getting commissions and started getting deadlines, but then I started changing the way I write, but haven't, at some point I haven't changed my like time management of how I write yet. So it takes longer for me to write it, but I'll still put it off until like pretty close to the deadline. And then I became like, oh no, oh my God, I got to start working now. So, but then finally, I think I'm arrived at a sweet spot. Like right now, I have a deadline that's 2 years from now, and I think that's just perfect for me. So I'm writing like 2 bars at a time.
What is your next really big thing? Like the ballet was
Oh, it's a marimba
huge.
concerto.
Is it this Boulez marimba concerto?
Yeah, that's marimba concerto. Yes,
Yeah,
I'm writing
written
Boulez as a marimba concerto.
that you stole from Boulez.
Oh, it's half Boulez, half Arvo part, and then half a little. There's always some Tandun in there,
None of
and
those
Bach is
sound
always at the root of it.
none of those sound compatible.
Yeah, that's
I
how you
want
make a stir fry and it become new music.
I want to see a draft before you let it out there.
Oh, but no, that speaking of Boulez, I remember that kind of relates to what we were talking about. There was this what was that like really difficult book he has a bunch of lectures that I don't really understand. But then one thing he said was like there are two kinds of creativity. One is the kind of creativity that follows what came before us, and another is the revolutionary kind that just kind of like creates your own path. I mean, not one is better than the other. They're just different. So maybe that relates to what we're talking about here today.
I saw a John Lane article once, maybe in PAS. I don't remember, but he called that craft versus art.
Right.
And I think, you can't really put it that simply, put it quite that black and white, but it's like a really good start to the distinction of the two. Like, so are you inventing something totally new, which would be like
Right.
art, or are you being a craftsman and you're replicating something and trying to just like play really good cymbal crashes in orchestra? That would be craft in that view.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess that kind of leads me to I think the last thing I really kind of want to have a chat about, which is like how do we still be new now? Do you guys have any thoughts or opinions, like what you expect to see next, or like what you hope people start doing, or what you hope to see less of? I feel like it's it's harder to be new because we see so much. I feel like students are just they're in this world of like, wow, I can see all this different stuff. So like it's clear like all the ideas are, already spoken for because there is so much to see at their fingertips.
You mean within the percussion world or within the music world
I
or
guess
within the world
whatever
world?
I guess whatever comes to mind. I was thinking percussion, but I think anything would be great. I mean, the rest of the musical world trickles down to percussion. So I think whatever goes up in that little peanut brain of yours, buddy.
I'd rather go with a bigger brain like Gordon's. I'm just counting it's close to 5 babysitters about to leave.
We'll get done. We'll get done. Yeah. Any thoughts there? It's okay if not. I think we've been long enough.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always think about that too. Like what's the next step and where are we going? I mean, I don't know. And on some level, and I'm just sort of spitballing here, I feel like everyone's trying to push the barrier all the time. Like maybe there's some time to, just not push the barrier and try to create good music. I don't know. And I think more recently I've been interested in that too, and less worried about, doorstop springs and, throwing snare drums across the room and all that. And actually just like, can I write a nice marimba piece or something? Like that's
Mhm.
maybe what my next thing will be. Yeah, and maybe tapping into more of that crafting, maybe more than, I don't know. I feel like, of course, it's not all been done before. There's still plenty of stuff you can do, but maybe there's also value in like doing something familiar really well.
Mhm.
Erica was actually just talking about that, those like in the context of those like modern Japanese marimba pieces like Conversations, Time or something.
Mhm.
I don't know. Does it seem to you guys that less people are playing those now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're like,
even
why don't we just
Keiko Abe,
play
I
those
mean,
well first, and then
yeah.
before moving on to your vinyao or whatever that new big hot thing is. But start with conversations. Play that well, then you can play
Or just
well
rock music
music.
on marimba, which drives me nuts. I mean, I guess there's a place for that, but like, I feel like there are people that would like to get 3 degrees in percussion just playing like rock music on marimba, and that's cool, but it's not necessarily like, I don't know.
It just needs drums. It's like a tease to me. It's like I really like rock music, but I need bass and drums and like poetry. Like there needs to be vocals, and it's just like my complaint is it's like I wish I was playing rock music. I wish I was like it's like yeah, you're just like wishing you just want to play playing rock music. Like go play rock music, start a band. Like that's what
Yeah, right.
it's just like there's nothing wrong with rock music. There's just it's like the people who say oh this is classical because it's like a metal band with a cellist. Like oh, there's nothing classical about that's not what makes it classical. There's just a shared instrument there. Anyway, yeah, I mean, all right, who else is pissed off? Gordon, come on.
Well, I don't know that I'm pissed off. I mean, I just want to keep working on my music. So every time I go, I'm saying, did I get something done today? Like when I practice, like Pablo Casals, who was asked, why do you keep practicing when you're 93? And he said, well, I think I'm finally being able to get some of this stuff right, is basically what he said. So I find that with my composition. If I keep working on it and keep working on it, I'll get something right now and then. And that's really all that matters to me at this point. I'm not trying to compete with anybody. Matter of fact, I'm in a non-competitive mode. I've probably written 2 hours worth of music in the last 6 months. Now, nobody's heard a note of it. I haven't published most of it yet. And you know what? I'm not sure I really care. I mean, I'm doing the music. I think it's getting better, and I like it. And when I have time, maybe I'll get this piece out and see if anybody else likes it. But my experience has been that nobody really likes the music I'm writing anyways, because it's not the soup du jour, right? It's not like all those pieces that come out based on the Celtic tradition, and they're all based on the same chords and the same melodies over. There's probably 20 or 30 of those pieces. And each time it comes out, everybody says, oh, this is so wonderful, I love this. And everybody plays it. And yet they don't know how to play Tsuyoshi Mirage or Time for Marimba. Time for Marimba, I mean, God, that's one of the greatest pieces ever written. And young students don't seem to be interested in that kind of stuff. Therefore, they're really not interested in my music because that's what I write.
When do you decide, like when, it sounds like you haven't decided yet, but like, I guess, yeah, do you think we'll see these pieces, more likely yes or more likely no, do you think?
Well, my problem is I haven't been able to get myself to videotape any of them. I've got the equipment, and a couple of years ago, I turned on the video camera and the tape recorder, and I got nervous. So I had to stop. I was here all by myself, and I realized, I hadn't played for anybody in almost 2 years. So I was nervous for the tape recorder. So I started doing that again, but there's been some things going on in my family, and that's taken time away. So I never got around to it, and yet I keep coming up with new pieces, and I sort of half learn them and get to the point where I think, okay, now I can record this. But then a new idea comes, and I start writing a different piece. So then I forget the old piece, and that just keeps spiraling for me. So I guess I'm just enjoying being in the midst of all of that stuff, and I'm happy just to keep doing it. And I'll take stock of myself at some point and try and get these things out.
Well, if it's any encouragement, it's evidence around here is that a lot of people play your stuff. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and tell your students thank you.
the
That sounds like a
library.
dream retirement, Gordon.
Yeah, it's the best thing I ever did. You all really should just retire now. Then you can do what you want, when you want, and you'll be so much more productive and so much more creative because you don't have to teach paradiddles anymore.
Is it? Can we just
I'll be
blow?
there in 30 years.
Can we just blow off our lessons more? Like we just like every other lesson, blow it off, and like, hey guys, you're on the blow off week. Sorry.
Well, there's a couple of teachers I know that the student would come in, and after 5 minutes, they'd say, leave. You're not prepared. Come back when you're ready. And then they had 50 minutes to do their own work. And the student really was not prepared and had no business entering the studio unless you had a Warren Benson. You know, I would go into Warren Benson's studio and say, oh, I'm so sorry, Warren. I didn't get a note written this week. And he'd say, don't worry about it, Gordon. Come on in. He'd sit me down in a chair, turn off the lights, and play the latest thing that he had heard of by some other composer. And an hour later, I left the room being totally inspired.
Cool.
That's what Warren Benson did for me.
Very cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. I like that idea. I mean, I'm sure you all struggle, Casey and Pius struggle with this too. A student that's not prepared, like, what do you do with that time? I know that's a completely different podcast topic, but that's interesting. You know, maybe
Edit here.
listening would
Next
be cool.
episode.
Yeah, next episode. That's interesting.
What I would try and do with my students is sight read. Okay, you got nothing ready. Okay, let's sight read. But, you know, they don't want to do that.
I've sent them away before. I mean, just a couple of times over the years, this school and my last school, you know, because literally I think like, okay, like you got to get this done, but for whatever reason, the recital's coming up or the rehearsal's coming up, and literally like we could do something else. And I have listened to things like, cool, let's score follow. Let's think about something. Yeah, you got 30 minutes. Let's listen to La Valse and follow along. And, you know, and they do. They walk away like super stoked and inspired. But other times, like, wait, literally, like, the best way to use an hour is to just like go practice. Like, that's what you really, really need to do. And yeah, then it turns out their whatever thing went okay.
I need to say too that these thoughts really come from about my last 5 years of teaching. So year 32 to the year 37. By then, let's face it, I was getting a little tired.
The bitter years, are those our bitter years coming up?
You're going to find out in another 10 or 20 years what I'm talking about.
Oh, I see it coming. Yep.
Definitely.
I've dipped a toe in chairing a committee here or there.
I thought that's what sabbaticals are for.
Boy, they help, don't they?
Oh boy, I look forward to
I don't have one for a while.
You know what I did on my first sabbatic? This would have been like, 1988, something like that. I watched game shows all day for a whole semester.
Nice.
I didn't do anything.
Didn't you need to write a report or something afterwards?
Yeah, what's your report look
I
like?
just didn't do it. Now, the next time, they said, yeah, and you're going to submit a report. So that's when I wrote my duo concertant for two marimbas and wind ensemble. Or that's when I wrote the piece Route 666 for Amadinda on subsequent sabbatics and made up nice reports. But that first one, that was back in the dark ages, you know, like before most of you guys were even born. I didn't do anything and I didn't write a report about it.
Well, one cool thing, I talked to my chair about just feeling overloaded with service work, and I was doing like the website for the music area. I was on a few committees, had a doctoral student, and all the percussion equipment duties and all that stuff. And I just let him know all that, and he hasn't put me on a committee at all this semester. I'm on nothing for the first time, and last year I was on very little. Like he replaced those, like the website. He hired someone. I mean, kudos to John, my department chair. I mean, he really listened to that and said, like, yeah, like that's not what we don't need you doing that much. And so I think he gave me like a very like kind and thoughtful break from a lot of things, and it's made being here like really, really, really awesome.
Good.
Yeah. You guys, thanks. It's been really fun, Pius. I know you got to relieve a babysitter. And hey, if you were a real parent, you do the podcast with your kid in the room like I do. He comes in, sits on the lap, grabs the camera, This is way too easy.
She's 10
Babysitter.
months old.
All right. That's a good
Can't
point.
stand up. Yeah, she's like, oh, oh.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so listen, Gene Koshinski, Gordon Stout, Pius Cheung, thanks you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
your time.
Yep. See you all later.
So, yeah.
Um,
Bye.